case of Jennifer Sabina. Benjamin and Jennifer, both from Wisconsin, didn't meet until many years later. Benjamin served in the U.S. Marine Corps, while Jennifer was a recent addition to the police department. A video recorded 2 years ago features her husband, Benjamin, sharing how they met while he was stationed in Iraq. In February 2005, Benjamin and several fellow Marines were struck by a mortar shell during the war. One Marine lost his life and several others, including Benjamin, were injured by shrapnel. He sustained serious injuries to his leg near the knee, his left arm, chest, and head. Fortunately, he survived the attack. While receiving treatment in Germany, he kept in touch with Jennifer by writing to her every day. Eventually, Benjamin returned to his home base in California. Throughout that time, he continued to email Jennifer frequently, and their relationship gradually developed. After leaving the army, his muscles began to heal, his kneecap recovered, and he started walking and using his arm again. He was even able to begin running. He moved back to Wisconsin and spent more time with Jennifer, and their love grew deeper. One day, he asked her if she would be happy to spend the rest of her life with him, and she said yes. Benjamin was honorably discharged in February 2005. After that, he married Jennifer, and they actively participated in church activities. There, Benjamin worked to overcome the psychological issues he experienced during the war. He also helped others in his church who were going through mental and emotional struggles. On December 24, 2012, Officer Jennifer Sabina was working the night shift. During her duty, she maintained contact with her husband, Benjamin, through text messages. The last message she received was around 3 a.m. At 4:24 a.m., the dispatcher on duty tried to reach her but received no response. Concerned for her safety, a colleague, Stahl, used GPS tracking to locate her police car. He discovered it was likely parked at the Wauwatosa Fire Station on Underwood Avenue, a common spot for officers to take breaks, grab food, or write reports. Stahl arrived at the scene in under 5 minutes. He found the police car and discovered Jennifer lying on the cold sidewalk in front of the fire station. She had suffered multiple head injuries from a weapon. The investigation into Jennifer's death has been ongoing since her body was found. In her 3 years of service, she worked as a police officer in Wauwatosa for 2 years. She is described as intelligent, energetic, always willing to help, and wanting to become a good police officer. State investigators began looking into the crime scene. They found shell casings from 2 different weapons, matching the type of ammunition typically used by the police department in that area. However, Jennifer's service weapon was missing and was not found at the scene. Surveillance cameras in the area were examined for clues about the suspect. Traffic camera footage was also collected to track vehicles entering and leaving the crime scene. Additionally, the snowy ground conditions helped investigators clearly identify tracks leading to and from the scene. If these tracks belonged to the killer, he would be the man Jennifer encountered as she walked out the back door of the fire department. When Benjamin arrived at the Wauwatosa police station that morning, he was promptly questioned about his activities the previous night, which is standard procedure. Benjamin stated that Jennifer left for her night shift around 5:15 p.m. on December 23rd. He did not leave the house until 10 p.m., and the only reason for leaving was to purchase a new video game. After returning home, he did not go out again until the police sergeant called him in the morning, after which he went directly to the station. Benjamin had not received any information about Jennifer over the phone and did not inquire about her condition. However, once at the station and during his questioning by detectives, he eventually asked about her after a few minutes. The police officer faced a difficult task in delivering to him the tragic news. After a moment of silence, when Benjamin calmed down, he shared that his wife was the one who supported him a lot in overcoming his post-war trauma. She was his strong support throughout his psychological struggles, always caring and present by his side. The situation was perplexing. The nature of the case suggests this was a personal attack, as there was no evidence of a criminal incident or altercation. Everything suggested that it was an ambush targeting her specifically. Jennifer had no enemies, and her colleagues knew it. Detectives then asked about Jennifer's mental state the day before she left for work and requested permission to search their home for any clues related to her murder. Benjamin claimed that he and his wife were very happy and that the night before she left for work, they had hugged and kissed. Later that day, investigators searched their home with Benjamin's permission. During the examination, they discovered 2 holes with bloodstains on the drywall, showing signs consistent with having been caused by a punch. At that moment, the detectives understood that Benjamin was experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder since returning from abroad. They also observed him trying to control his emotions at the police station. Another important discovery at Benjamin's home was a bullet casing. However, no matching bullets were found. Only several corresponding shell casings were present, which raised suspicions. On the same day, Benjamin Sabina was arrested, and his interrogation continued. The investigator pressed him, claiming that something significant had happened that morning, and only he knew the truth. However, he denied any wrongdoing, insisting that his feelings for Jennifer were genuine and that he was not angry with her. He stated that he would never harm her because his love for her was so deep. Furthermore, he stated that if he were present, he would save her and do everything possible to prevent the tragedy from happening on Christmas Day. Detectives from the Wauwatosa Police Department began reviewing video footage from traffic cameras. They concentrated on the area around the fire station at the time of the murder, which occurred at approximately 4 a.m. on December 24th. Surveillance footage from the fire station located east of Benjamin's home showed a black Toyota with tinted windows heading towards the fire station at 1:35 a.m. Later, at 3:45 a.m., the same black Toyota was seen returning west on Burley Street. The timing of this sighting coincided with the time the car left the scene immediately after the incident, and its route matched the route it would have taken to return to his home. When detectives reviewed the video, they checked the parking lot at the police station and confirmed their suspicions. In the parking lot, they discovered a 2012 black Toyota Prius with dark-tinted windows. This was the car Benjamin had parked there before he rushed to the station to ask about his wife. A match between the bullet casings found in his home and CCTV footage led to an official search warrant being issued for his home. During the inspection, agents discovered hair that had been washed down the bathtub drain and noted that the shower curtain had been taken down. A trash can was found in the garage, along with dark clothing hidden in the attic. They also discovered a weapon registered to Jennifer and another weapon in the kitchen. As evidence against Benjamin grew, his demeanor shifted from that of a loving husband to that of a ruthless killer. Eventually, he confessed to the crime. He admitted that he had stalked his wife for several days and waited for her outside a fire station for hours. When he spotted her patrol car, he approached and began to attack her. He claimed that she appeared to reach for her weapon, but he was faster. He pulled out the weapon and killed her when she tried to stand up again. When a detective asked if Jennifer recognized her attacker, Benjamin replied that he didn't think she did. He also admitted to punching her in the face multiple times to ensure she was dead. He then shared his disturbing thoughts, revealing that he had contemplated ending his life. He claimed that his loving wife had told him that if he died, she would do the same. Therefore, he rationalized that killing Jennifer was an act of mercy, believing he was sparing her from the pain of having to take her own life after his death. The investigators did not believe Benjamin's story or his complicated reasoning. They found no evidence to support his claim that the murder was motivated by compassion. However, they admitted that he was very jealous. He was upset about the attention Jennifer received from other men, or at least he thought so. Additionally, Benjamin had a known short temper. Just weeks before her death, Jennifer shared with a coworker an episode from Benjamin's life that involved post-traumatic stress disorder. She explained that he experienced flashbacks, especially at night, which could lead to aggressive behavior. She felt anxious about working the night shift because it meant her husband would be home alone in a potentially dangerous situation. There was a serious incident when Benjamin pointed a weapon at Jennifer's head while he was having a nightmare. She shared with her colleagues that Benjamin seemed haunted by horrific memories from his time serving in Iraq. His time in Iraq had deeply affected him. He killed 68 people and lost over 50 friends, witnessing the deaths of those close to him. As a Marine, he had been trained to kill, which led to his own internal struggles. During Benjamin's trial, he was brought into court in a wheelchair, handcuffed, and wearing a special vest designed to prevent self-injury. He faced charges of first-degree murder for the death of his wife, Jennifer Sabina. The state of Wisconsin alleges that Benjamin killed his wife out of jealousy. He was jealous of her career, while he himself was unable to continue serving in the military or working in law enforcement due to his injuries. He was also described as possessive and prone to angry outbursts. However, his defense attorney, Michael Steeney, pointed out that he had a troubled military past and had suffered a traumatic brain injury and severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Psychiatrists also noted that Benjamin's condition was one of the worst they had ever seen. Eventually, Benjamin officially changed his plea to not guilty. Although he had previously admitted his guilt, he now cited mental illness and defects, thereby shifting the focus to psychological evaluations of him. The judge appointed a psychiatrist to assess his mental condition. The prosecution needed to show that Benjamin was aware of his actions. He admitted to stalking his wife in the days leading up to her murder, suggesting that his actions were premeditated. Furthermore, he took steps to cover up his tracks, such as showering extensively to remove evidence. He also hid both weapons in his home and spent several hours denying his guilt to the police, initially reacting with shock and anger. As the trial progressed, the evidence against him grew, and it became clear that he was guilty of the premeditated murder of his wife. Proving Benjamin's innocence due to mental illness or defect is challenging. In his case, 2 psychiatrists testified in court, both agreeing that he had mental health issues, including post-traumatic stress disorder. However, they also concluded that he was still capable of understanding right from wrong and did not find him not guilty by reason of insanity. Therefore, it was clearly established from a medical perspective that Benjamin Sabina was mentally ill but still conscious of his actions. After 6 months, Benjamin changed his plea and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. The plea agreement gave him the opportunity to receive a sentence that would make him eligible for parole. He admitted causing Jennifer's death and intending to kill her, which is a violation of Wisconsin law. Jennifer's family supported the plea bargain and expressed their gratitude for it. During the sentencing, Benjamin's mother read a statement to the court, reflecting on how her son had changed after returning from war. She shared that the once joyful and playful Benjamin had become consumed by the emotional scars from his experiences. She mentioned that he suffered from severe PTSD, experienced flashbacks, insomnia, hypervigilance, anxiety, and had even attempted to end his life due to the trauma of the deaths he witnessed while serving. She noted that she wore her son's dog tags as a reminder that the son they had sent to war was not the same person who had come home. Jennifer's mother also testified at Benjamin's sentencing hearing. She recounted that after a sleepless night, she received a call from the funeral home on Christmas Day. She had asked to see her daughter, but they told her that her face was so badly damaged that she shouldn't look at her. She was overwhelmed with panic and tears. Then, on December 26th, Benjamin, whom she considered her son, admitted to killing Jennifer. She forgave him. The minimum sentence for first-degree murder is 20 years, while the maximum sentence is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Prosecutor Mark Williams recommended a sentence of 40 to 60 years. In his final statement, Benjamin expressed remorse, saying he did not mean to do this to Jennifer Sabina and that he was sorry for taking her life. He added that if he could trade his life for hers right now, he would do it without hesitation. The judge considered Benjamin's confession and acceptance of responsibility as positive factors. The key issue for the judge was to determine how long Benjamin would have to wait before he could apply for early release. It's important to note that a petition for parole does not guarantee it will be granted. Ultimately, the parole term was set at 35 years. If Benjamin Sabina is ever approved for parole, he will be 65 years old at that time. The story of Jennifer Sabina is a heartbreaking tragedy that reflects the impact of war and the terrible consequences of being unable to control emotions. She dedicated her entire life to the community and always supported her husband. However, it all ended tragically in an act of violence, leaving her family and friends in deep sorrow. Lisa Holm was born on February 7, 1998, in the small Swedish town of Havdi. It was a quiet and peaceful place where she lived with her parents and older sister. Lisa was a kind, positive, and determined person. Even before finishing school, she decided she wanted to go to Australia and study architecture. Lisa also traveled a lot with her parents, visiting many other countries. She was also quite independent. Since her teenage years, Lisa had been working at various part-time jobs to earn some money on her own. Before the summer of 2015, when Lisa was 17, she finally got a serious job at a cafe about a 40-minute drive from her home. For the first few weeks, her parents drove her there, but soon her father decided to buy her a scooter. Lisa had a license for this type of transport, while she could only get a car license after turning 18. She was happy with this gift because she wanted to commute to work on her own. But for the first few weeks, her father accompanied her in his car since Lisa had almost no experience driving on the roads. She only worked weekends, and her father accompanied her every morning and evening. This went on until June 7th, when he finally let her drive to the cafe alone. Somewhere around lunchtime, her parents decided to visit her at work and have lunch together. That day, the cafe was pretty crowded, so Lisa was really busy with work. She took a short break for lunch, had a snack with her parents, and they went back home. At 6:23 p.m., Lisa texted her father that she was leaving work, but 3 minutes later, he received a call from her. He picked up, but no one answered. He heard some voices in the background and thought Lisa had dialed his number accidentally. The father thought she was talking to her colleagues and also heard the sound of a car door slamming shut. He called Lisa's name several times with no answer, then ended the call and began waiting for her to get home. But she didn't show up. An hour passed, and Lisa's parents started to worry. She should have arrived by now, so her father immediately thought something might have happened to her on the way. It was her first time riding alone on the scooter, and he was deeply concerned about her safety. He tried calling her several times, but Lisa's phone was off. After waiting a few more minutes, her father decided to hit the road, hoping to meet her along the way since Lisa should have taken the shortest route. The father feared Lisa might have had an accident, so he drove at a slow pace, scanning the road. But Lisa was nowhere to be found. The man eventually reached the cafe without finding his daughter. Upon arriving at her workplace, he noticed Lisa's scooter parked in front of the building. By that moment, the man was already in a state of panic, having been unable to find his daughter the entire way. Seeing her scooter, he immediately calmed down, thinking that for some reason, she had been delayed at work. However, there was no one in the cafe, and the man noticed something else. Lisa's scooter keys were left in the ignition, with a helmet hanging from its handle. All of this led him to believe that something bad had happened to his daughter. She would have never left the keys in the scooter, abandoning it in the parking lot unattended. Meanwhile, Lisa's mother called the cafe owner in hopes of shedding light on her daughter's whereabouts. But the woman claimed to have no idea where she could have gone. She had called her employees around 6 p.m., and they said they were closing the cafe. After the call from Lisa's mother, the cafe owner immediately got into her car and headed there. On the way, she called 4 of her friends, who lived nearby, and asked them to help with the search. When the cafe owner arrived at the scene, they, along with Lisa's father, began searching both the establishment itself and the surrounding area. Their last hope was that Lisa, for some reason, might have decided to take a bus instead of the scooter. They checked the schedule, and her mother, along with Lisa's older sister, drove to the bus stop in their town. Unfortunately, this version was not confirmed. Lisa was not on the bus, so her relatives immediately contacted the police. By that time, it was almost 10 p.m., and it was already dark outside. The police immediately launched extensive searches. The fact that Lisa's scooter was left in the parking lot with the keys led them to consider the possibility of abduction. Cases like this are quite rare in Sweden, especially in the remote provincial area where Lisa's town was located. Therefore, police immediately dispatched several groups with search dogs, while other officers began knocking on every house located near the cafe. When Lisa's classmates and friends learned about her disappearance, they began spreading information about it on social media, hoping to attract more attention and possibly find some witnesses. The search continued all night, but it yielded no results. On Monday morning, the police department announced Lisa's disappearance to the public, urging anyone who had useful information to come forward. Around the same time, a man who came to work at a barn right across from the cafe discovered a motorcycle glove on the floor and reported it to the police. Detectives had already inspected this barn on the evening of Lisa's disappearance, but they hadn't noticed the glove there. They showed it to Lisa's parents, who confirmed that the glove indeed belonged to their daughter. This further supported the abduction theory, and the police deployed additional resources for the search. By that time, news of Lisa's disappearance had spread throughout the country, and hundreds of volunteers joined the search. On Tuesday, police received several more alarming clues. Volunteers searched the area along the dirt road located a few hundred yards from the cafe. There, they found a phone case, a receipt, a ticket, and a broken smartphone screen. Investigators immediately determined that all these items belonged to Lisa and focused the search in that area. Soon, they found other parts of the broken smartphone, Lisa's ID, and several more receipts. All these items were scattered along the same dirt road. After the discovery of those pieces of evidence, the police became almost certain that Lisa had become a victim of abduction. They threw all available resources into the search, and with each passing day, more and more people joined in. This case became the main news topic in Sweden, and hundreds of volunteers flocked from all over the country to participate in the search. A local volunteer organization specializing in finding missing people also joined the effort. All of this made Lisa's search operation the largest in the country's modern history, with over 1,000 people participating in total. The police also received numerous calls with tips. One woman recounted that she went for a jog the day before Lisa's disappearance. At some point, a man who stood next to his car stopped her in the middle of the road. He spoke to her in English and asked for directions to a city she had never heard of. She tried to show him the way on Google Maps, but the man asked her to get into his car and show the route on his navigator. Naturally, the woman found this request quite suspicious, so she refused and continued running. She also shared one interesting detail with the police. The woman believed she had already seen this man among the workers who were repairing the same barn located across the road from the cafe. Lisa's colleagues also shared one observation. On the day of her disappearance, one of the witnesses noticed two men standing across the road from the cafe, looking towards the establishment. She didn't think much of it at the time, but after Lisa's disappearance, she decided to share this fact with the police. The next morning, on Wednesday, Lisa's father, along with some friends, went to search the dirt road where her belongings were found. Walking a bit further, he made several more alarming discoveries. He found Lisa's driver's license and her house keys. It all seemed as if Lisa was being taken along this road away from the cafe while the abductor was throwing her belongings out of their car or other vehicle they used to kidnap her. The police and volunteers concentrated all their efforts on this area, but no other items were found. That same evening, a friend of Lisa's father was returning home from the search. Passing by the cafe, he noticed that the police tape had been removed from the barn where Lisa's glove was found. The man decided to go inside and look for any other clues once more. He grabbed a flashlight from his car as it was already getting dark outside and walked around the premises for several minutes until something shiny on the floor caught his attention. When he looked closer, he saw a woman's earring and another one just like it nearby. The man reported this to the police, who showed the earrings to Lisa's parents. They confirmed that these pieces of jewelry belonged to their daughter. The police once again sealed off the barn and searched it more thoroughly. The lead detective later explained that on the day of Lisa's search, their main focus was on finding the girl herself, so the barn was inspected not so thoroughly. They might have missed such small items as earrings, but now they brought in numerous forensic experts along with search dogs. This time, they noticed a rather unusual piece of evidence. Behind one of the walls, the police found human feces. At a glance, it may seem unrelated to the case, but the forensic experts put forward a quite interesting theory. They explained that when criminals commit serious and horrible crimes, their bodies produce an extreme amount of adrenaline, which sometimes leads to the uncontrollable need to relieve themselves. For example, it's common for killers to wet themselves before or during the murder. Considering that Lisa's glove and earrings were found in the barn, The police theorized that if she was indeed abducted, the perpetrator might have dragged her into this building. Therefore, detectives didn't rule out the possibility that this person, under the influence of adrenaline, couldn't hold it and relieve themselves, so these feces were sent for DNA analysis. On Friday, the search area was expanded, and volunteers reached a farm located about 2 miles from the cafe. It was a complex of several large buildings where many people worked, and the search team decided to inspect them all. However, shortly after they arrived, 2 men came to the farm. They didn't speak Swedish and communicated only in English. One of them said that the police had already been at this farm, but the search team leader didn't rush to believe it. He thought he would have known about it if that were the case, so he decided to continue the search. The 2 men walked around the farm for a while, watching the volunteers, and eventually drove away. About an hour later, members of the search team found a pile of branches behind the cowshed. Under it, they found a motorcycle helmet, jacket, and headphones. The police immediately arrived at the scene and confirmed that all these items belonged to Lisa. They sent forensic experts to the farm for a more thorough search. Detectives also heard the story about the 2 strange men who tried to dissuade the volunteers from inspecting the farm. The police also recalled the story of a woman who encountered a suspicious man speaking English while jogging. In fact, they already had an idea who it might be. From the first days of the search, they had visited all the houses near the cafe, and in one of them lived 2 brothers from Lithuania along with the wife of one of them. All 3 didn't speak Swedish and communicated in English. They were the only people within several miles who didn't speak the local language. The police also had other indirect reasons to suspect them. The brothers worked in the barn across the road from the cafe and at the farm where Lisa's helmet was found. They were familiar with these locations, and the dirt road where Lisa's belongings were found led to their house. Considering that there were no other suspects, the police decided to question all 3 of them. Meanwhile, forensic experts arrived at the farm. Together with the volunteers, they continued to inspect this area, and soon, their attention was drawn to an old trailer. It was surrounded by tall grass and looked as if it hadn't been used in many years. But next to its door, the grass was flattened, as if something had been lying there recently. Some of the grass was also trapped under the door, indicating that it had been recently opened. As soon as the forensic experts opened the door, they were immediately met with a strong smell of decay. Inside the trailer, there were many lockers for clothing. Apparently, it was once used as a changing room for workers. All the lockers except one were locked, leading the experts to suspect that Lisa's body might be in one of them. They began opening each locker and eventually saw that Lisa's body was actually in one that was left open, hidden behind a pile of old clothes and rags. Despite the small size of the locker, the perpetrator managed to fit their victim inside. Lisa had a rope around her neck and a large amount of tape over her head. Her pants were pulled down and her shirt was pulled up. Medical experts determined that Lisa died from strangulation. However, they found no signs of sexual assault. All of her clothing was handed over to the lab while news of the discovery of her body rapidly spread throughout the country. All this time, the news of Lisa's abduction dominated headlines in Sweden. When her body was found and the public learned of Lisa's brutal murder, the case shook the entire country. Such crimes were extremely rare in Sweden, and people were shocked that someone could commit such a heinous act. On the same day that her body was discovered, something unusual and rather eerie occurred. YouTube users stumbled upon a video posted 13 days before the murder. The video was titled 13, and it featured a countdown timer. What was most unsettling was the name of the channel that uploaded the video. It was called Lisa Holm. News of this video quickly spread throughout the media, leaving many people stunned by the series of coincidences. Some people began to speculate that someone had predicted the murder, but in reality, it turned out to be much simpler. It appeared that someone had just changed the channel name and video title after Lisa's body was found. Either this person wanted to spark another conspiracy theory or was just playing a cruel prank. Meanwhile, the police were doing everything in their power to find the killer as quickly as possible. At the time of Lisa's discovery, investigators had already brought in 2 brothers and a woman, and they all denied any involvement in the murder. They claimed that at the time of the abduction, they were at home, providing alibis for each other. According to their accounts, the older brother, Narigis, was asleep in his room while his wife was preparing dinner, and the younger brother was on the computer. Narigis also added that around 8 p.m., he woke up and went to the gas station, where he bought pizza and cigarettes. The police were pretty skeptical of their alibis, as all three could have simply been covering for each other. They collected their DNA samples, but investigators still lacked any evidence directly linking any of them to the murder. However, this didn't last long. Forensic experts were working in the barn and on the farm, utilizing all available resources and manpower, and soon their efforts paid off. In the barn, there was a small, office-like room. It had a large window overlooking the cafe. Upon examining this room, experts discovered 15 different traces of male semen on the walls and floor near this window. It appeared as if someone had stood there watching the cafe employees, including Lisa, and satisfying themselves. These semen samples were immediately sent to the laboratory, and experts quickly extracted DNA profiles from them. All 15 semen traces matched the DNA of the older brother, 35-year-old Narigis. The same applied to the feces found in the barn. They also belonged to him. In the next room, which had previously been used for storing cow's milk, forensic experts noticed a pipe about 2 feet above the floor, covered in a thick layer of dust except for a small strip. The size of this strip perfectly matched the rope used to strangle Lisa. Traces of blood were also found on this pipe, and the DNA analysis confirmed it belonged to Narigis. On the floor beneath the pipe, they discovered a piece of the same rope. Experts examined it and identified 2 DNA profiles, Lisa's and Narigis's. This was a significant breakthrough for the police. It finally linked the man to the rope used to kill the victim. Furthermore, a hair belonging to Lisa was found on the floor of this room. Another crucial piece of evidence came from her jacket. DNA traces belonging to Narigis were also found on it. Based on this evidence, the police believed that she was killed right there. They pieced together an approximate sequence of events. Narigis had been observing the cafe for some time, and when Lisa was alone in the parking lot, he approached her. Based on the jogger's account, he could have asked Lisa for directions to a certain city or used some other tactics. Then, Narigis might have asked her to get into his car to enter the route into the GPS system. Considering Lisa was kind-hearted and always tried to help others, she might have agreed. Once she was in the car, the perpetrator taped her mouth shut and drove her to the barn. There, he wrapped the rope around her neck and hung her from the pipe. According to the medical experts, this sight likely excited him so much that he defecated on the floor due to an adrenaline rush. When she died, he placed Lisa's body in the car and drove to the farm, tossing her belongings out the window along the way. There, he hid the body in the trailer locker, covering it with old clothes scattered around. All of this, from the moment of the abduction, took the perpetrator less than an hour. Despite all the evidence, Narigis continued to insist on his innocence. His wife and younger brother had to be released because there was nothing against them. Once free, they almost immediately left Sweden and returned to their homeland, Lithuania. The preparation for the trial was intense. Narigis claimed he had worked in that barn for a long time, suggesting his DNA could have been present there due to his job. Additionally, he had an alibi provided by his wife and brother. Although there were serious doubts about the credibility of both sources, in court this could have definitely worked in his favor. On the other hand, the presence of Narigis's DNA on the victim's clothing could only be explained by direct contact with her on the day of the murder. The police also found a witness who saw his car near the cafe shortly before and after Lisa's abduction. According to them, the car passed along the road between the cafe and the farm several times at the same time when Narigis was supposed to be sleeping at home, according to his brother and wife. For several months after the discovery of her body, experts continued to examine all the available evidence using the most advanced equipment. Eventually, they uncovered traces of Narigis's DNA on almost all of Lisa's clothing, including the inside of her underwear. Considering that the whole country was still following the case, investigators continued to search for any other useful clues that could impact the legal process and further prove Narigis's involvement. They even went to Lithuania to speak with his wife and brother once again. The woman continued to insist that he did not leave the house between 6 and 8 p.m. But when it was the younger brother's turn, detectives suddenly got what they wanted. After telling him about all the evidence against his brother and detailing what he did with the 17-year-old girl, the man decided to tell them everything. He claimed that Nergis actually was not at home that evening and only returned around 7:30 p.m. He was covered in dirt and immediately threw all his clothes into the washing machine. When the police started to question all the residents and reached their house, Nergis whispered to his brother, "Tell them I was home at that time." Later, Nergis explained that he was afraid he would be framed for a crime he didn't commit because he was an immigrant and had no alibi for the time of the abduction. The younger brother truly believed that his relative had nothing to do with it, but after hearing about all the evidence, he realized it wasn't the case. Lisa's funeral took place only a month after her murder. The church where it was held could only accommodate 130 people, but there were many more who came to say goodbye to her. Organizers even decided to set up benches and large screens outside so that everyone could watch the ceremony. The trial began 4 months after the murder. This case once again captured the attention of the entire country, so everyone involved in the process was under tremendous pressure. None of them had the right to make a mistake. Nergis's lawyer insisted that his client's DNA could have ended up on the victim's clothing because he had worked in the barn. The prosecution, however, pointed out that this version made no sense, especially in the case of Lisa's underwear. The only way the suspect's DNA could have ended up there was if he touched the victim's underwear. The lawyer couldn't provide any other solid facts pointing to his client's innocence. At one point, he tried to push the version that the real murderer was Nergis's younger brother. According to this theory, the brother somehow took multiple samples of Nergis's DNA and placed them on the victim's body as well as at the crime scene. However, the lawyer failed to explain the possibility of such manipulations with the DNA. The trial lasted for a month, and Nergis was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment in a high-security prison. Given that this is Sweden we're talking about, the facility resembled more of a decent 3-star hotel. His lawyer attempted to appeal the verdict, but the appeal was rejected. In early 2017, Nergis himself applied for deportation and transfer to a prison in his homeland. The reasons for this decision were unknown. Lithuanian prisons are significantly worse than Swedish ones, yet the court decided to approve his request. After all, providing comfortable conditions of detention costs Swedish taxpayers several $100s per day for each individual inmate. Later that same year, his motives became clear. He appealed to a Lithuanian court, and his sentence was reduced from life to 15 years. However, the joy was short-lived for the murderer. A few weeks later, the court overturned its decision, and Nergis was once again destined to spend his entire life in prison. Only now, he had no chance of returning to the comfortable Swedish cell. 5 years later, in August 2022, Nergis faced yet another downside of being transferred to a Lithuanian prison. While inmates were being moved to another block, one of them attacked Nergis with a shank. He suffered serious injuries and died on the way to the hospital. As for his wife, the question of her involvement is still not entirely ruled out. Police noted that there is practically no chance of her direct involvement in the abduction or murder. In that case, experts would have found her DNA on Lisa's clothing or belongings. However, it cannot be ruled out that she knew of her husband's crime and helped him evade justice by providing a false alibi. Nergis's younger brother also raises questions. Cafe employees reported seeing 2 men standing near the barn and watching them. Considering that one of them was likely Nergis himself, the other should have been his brother. However, the man's DNA was not found either in the barn itself or on Lisa's clothing, making his involvement in the murder unlikely. Perhaps they were indeed observing the young employees with the older brother and even discussing inappropriate things, but only Nergis decided to commit such a heinous crime. The case of Lauren Giddings. Lauren Teresa Giddings was born on April 18, 1984, in Tacoma Park, Maryland. She grew up with her 2 older sisters, Sarah and Caitlin. Her parents, Karen and William, maintained a warm and friendly atmosphere in the family. From a young age, she was always studious and religious. She was a member of St. Mary's Catholic Church and attended church from kindergarten through high school. In February 2002, at the age of 18, Lauren graduated from high school. That same year, she went to Georgia to attend an academy, where she studied until February 2006. After leaving the academy, she returned home and worked at the National Public Policy Center in Washington. In February 2008, she returned to Georgia to study law at Mercer University. Lauren was a blue-eyed, blonde with an athletic build who loved nature and animals, especially her pet dog, a Pekingese. Her relatives described her as a kind person who respected others' opinions. Sarah later noted that during college, Lauren transformed from a shy person into an active young woman with many friends. She was the pride of her family, and they had high hopes for her. However, her move to Georgia set off a series of unfortunate incidents that led to a tragic end. Mercer University is located in Macon, a city in central Georgia, right across from Lauren's dorm. Most of the people living in the dormitories were university students, and they usually knew each other. Among them was Stephen Mark McDaniel, who lived near Lauren's room and was also in law school. Both were members of the Federalist Society, an organization of some 60,000 lawyers, including both students and practicing professionals. Lauren served as president of the society, while Stephen served as vice president. This was their only relationship. Stephen was known to be quiet. He was not very social and rarely drank. Lauren, on the other hand, was very attractive, had many interests, and maintained a busy schedule. Before they met at university, Stephen and Lauren had very different lives. Stephen was born on September 9, 1985, in Atlanta, Georgia. His parents, Glenda and William, worked in a factory. He was a bright child who valued cleanliness and organization. Until he was 13, he sang in the church choir in his hometown. Stephen aspired to write a novel, pursue a career in criminal law, and ultimately become a federal judge. After completing high school, he enrolled in law school in February 2008, where he met Lauren. He had worked up the courage to ask her out a few times, but Lauren had kindly declined, explaining that she was dating David, a lawyer from Atlanta, who was 20 years her senior. They started dating in February 2007, before she went to college, when she interned at the law firm where he worked. After she moved to Georgia, David followed her, and their relationship continued. To discourage Stephen from pursuing her, Lauren mentioned that she and David planned to leave the city after graduation and live together. On May 31st, Lauren fulfilled one of her biggest dreams, graduating with a Juris Doctorate. Her next goal was to obtain a license to practice as a lawyer, which required passing a challenging exam. As she prepared for the exam, everything went smoothly, and she felt confident about her future. However, she knew she would soon need to leave the city. Stephen silently accepted this fact. On the surface, he appeared calm, but in his mind, he had other plans. In June, Caitlin got married in Maryland, and Lauren attended the wedding. Soon after, she returned to her dormitory in Georgia to focus on studying for her upcoming exams. On the evening of June 25th, David received an email from Lauren. In the email, she mentioned feeling uneasy and sensing that something strange was happening in her house that reminded her of a similar experience she had over a year ago. At the time, she told her sister, Caitlin, that she suspected someone had broken into her home and gone through her belongings. At this point, Lauren's family and friends knew she was busy studying for exams, so they weren't worried when she stopped communicating. The last time anyone saw her was on Saturday, June 25th, at a store. Caitlin sent her a few messages but didn't think much about the lack of response. Caitlin believed she was too busy to respond. It wasn't until Wednesday evening, June 29th, that David and her relatives began to worry because she had been silent for so long. David called Caitlin to ask if she had heard from Lauren, which worried her, as she had also tried to contact Lauren to no avail. She then contacted some of Lauren's friends, but no one had any information. Ashley, a friend of Lauren's, went to knock on her room, but no one answered, and it was quiet inside. Curious, she looked for Lauren's car and found it missing. The 2004 Mitsubishi was usually parked where Lauren always left it. Ashley remembered that Lauren had shown her where the spare key was in case of an emergency, so she used it to get into the apartment. Everything was in order. Lauren's personal belongings, phone, wallet, passport, and computer were in their usual places. Only Lauren was missing. While everyone was frantically searching for Lauren and trying to find clues about her whereabouts, Stephen entered the apartment. He stayed for a while to observe and chat with a few people before leaving. Ashley then discovered that Lauren's phone was dead, so she plugged it in to charge. Once the phone turned on, she checked it and saw that the last calls were made on June 25th, 4 days earlier. Realizing it was time to involve the authorities, she called 911. A few minutes later, police officers from Mercer University arrived and relayed the information to the Macon police. After midnight, police officers, along with Lauren's friends and neighbors, began searching for her. At 3 a.m., after a thorough check of the dormitory area, the police left without any news about Lauren. Caitlin became worried and decided to inform her parents. Her father quickly got in the car and drove to Macon to file a missing person report. After her father filed the report, the detectives began their investigation. They drove to the dormitory where Lauren lived but couldn't find a parking space, so they parked in front of a dumpster. When investigators entered Lauren's room, they used luminol, a chemical that can detect blood, to conduct a test. They sprayed luminol on the walls, floors, and some objects in Lauren's living room, kitchen, and bedroom. However, things took a turn for the worse when they entered the bathroom and found the floor reacting violently to the luminol. At this point, everyone realized this was a crime scene and that something terrible had happened to Lauren. Meanwhile, friends and family continued to search for her. When interviewing Stephen, he described Lauren as a good and honest person but admitted that he did not know where she was. According to Stephen, she had gone jogging and was attacked by a criminal. At the time he was sharing this, a garbage truck arrived. However, they were unable to collect the trash because a police car had parked in the wrong place and blocked the entrance to the trash bin. This was a pivotal moment that helped investigators quickly uncover the truth about what had happened to Lauren. Several detectives, having found nothing in Lauren's apartment and returning to their car, suddenly sensed a foul odor. It was the smell of death. They traced the odor to the garbage containers and began to investigate them. Inside one black plastic bag, they discovered a decomposing human torso. After examining it, the detectives concluded that it was likely the remains of a female, probably belonging to Lauren. While Stephen was talking to a reporter, a press officer interrupted to announce that the police had just discovered a body in a trash can behind the house. Initially confused and silent for a few seconds, Stephen then asked again about the body. He stammered that he needed to sit down, turned away from the camera, walked a short distance, and sat down near some bushes. Throughout this, the media operator captured his reactions. He appeared pale and was visibly shaking. Then, on the night of June 30th, Stephen voluntarily went to the police station to provide a statement. The questioning lasted for 12 long hours. When asked about Lauren, he said he always noticed when she left or entered the dormitory. Even though he did not speak to her directly, he could hear or see her passing by his window. Furthermore, he claimed that he was always aware of all the activities in the dormitory. After being questioned, Stephen allowed the police into his home, including his bedroom, where they discovered a rope, several weapons, blood-stained blue gloves, a master key to open the apartment door, and a pair of women's underwear. The investigators also seized Stephen's car, where they found more bloodstains. They found his computer, which contained conversations on a blog under the alias Sun. In this blog, he wrote about women and violence. In another post, Stephen discussed a situation that seemed to involve Lauren. He mentioned that he had been consumed by thoughts of one person for a long time, someone he wanted to protect from harm. If given the chance, he would have fought against anything that could hurt her without hesitation. But his mental struggles prevented him from doing so. He couldn't even confess his feelings to her, leaving him to watch her from afar. On Stephen's computer, many compromising photos were discovered, including pictures of Lauren. Additionally, a hacksaw with bloodstains was found in the tool cabinet, suggesting that a disturbing situation had occurred. Detectives concluded that Stephen had committed a heinous crime against Lauren. The evidence collected was sufficient to officially arrest Stephen McDaniel on July 2, 2011. On July 6th, DNA tests showed that body parts found in a trash can belong to Lauren. In August 2011, Stephen was charged with murder. Police thoroughly searched the dormitory and surrounding areas for other body parts but found nothing more. Despite overwhelming evidence, he maintained his innocence during the early stages of his detention. After examining the contents of Stephen's computer, investigators discovered that he had been monitoring Lauren's social media accounts. In addition to the murder charge on August 23rd, Stephen was charged with 7 more counts and was ordered to post bail of $850,000, a huge amount of money for him and his family. In February 2013, the prosecutor's office announced that they would not seek the death penalty at the request of Lauren's family. In 2014, just a week before his trial, Stephen surprised everyone by pleading guilty. The decision to plead guilty was part of a deal with prosecutors in which he agreed to accept responsibility for Lauren's death in exchange for dropping several other charges against him. Nearly 3 years after her murder, he recounted what really happened. Stephen said that on the morning of June 26th, he entered Lauren's apartment while she was sleeping. He sat on her bed to watch her. When she woke up and saw him, she tried to stay calm and pleaded with him not to hurt her. Instead of leaving, he grabbed Lauren by the neck and squeezed tightly. She fought back desperately to escape. They both fell to the floor, and her legs got trapped under the bed, which worked to Stephen's advantage since she couldn't kick him. However, she managed to hit him with her hands and pulled off his mask. Fear engulfed her when she realized the attacker was her neighbor, Stephen, a fellow law student and vice president of the same organization she led. Once a shy and reserved guy who had asked her out, he had transformed into a terrifying figure. He violently grabbed her by the neck in an attempt to strangle her. Despite Lauren's desperate pleas for him to stop, he ignored her cries and continued to tighten his grip for several minutes. When she fell still, he released her at 4:30 a.m. Stephen then dragged Lauren's body into the bathroom, placed her in the bathtub, and returned to his apartment. There, he spent the day on his computer. He eventually returned to Lauren's apartment with a hacksaw. Without hesitation, he began wrapping the body parts in black bags and throwing them into various trash cans around the dormitory. He kept her torso for 2 more days before dumping it in a container outside the building, where police later discovered it. Stephen reported that within 48 hours of the crime, he had disposed of the mask and shirt stained with Lauren's blood. When questioned about the motive for the murder, he confessed to being obsessed with Lauren since they met. He revealed that he had been spying on her for months, using a setup to observe her without her noticing. Stephen also admitted that he had carefully researched methods to avoid detection. Thanks to this, he was able to use the master key he had stolen from the dormitory manager to enter Lauren's room. She was about to become a lawyer, something she had always dreamed of throughout her life. However, she had no idea that Stephen, who had been secretly watching her, would completely transform her life. After a trial in 2014, Stephen Mark McDaniel was convicted of a violent crime and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole. After receiving the verdict, he began to do everything he could to regain his freedom. Despite admitting guilt, he maintained that he did not abuse Lauren. Stephen also shared with investigators his irrational belief that Lauren was still alive. He claimed to have a split personality, which he said made it difficult for him to explain his actions, yet he continued to follow his daily routine. He expressed feelings of remorse and stated that he missed Lauren greatly, but he understood that he could not expect forgiveness from her family. In 2018, Stephen's father set up an online fundraising page to hire a lawyer for his son's defense. However, the campaign was met with strong opposition from Lauren's family and friends, leading to its immediate cancellation. As a result, Stephen was forced to represent himself at the hearing. He argued that his rights were violated in the original sentence. Additionally, he criticized his previous lawyers for not defending him adequately, but his request for a review was denied. He subsequently appealed to the Supreme Court of Georgia and then to the Supreme Court of the United States, but both appeals were rejected. In January 2022, as well as in May and December of that year, he attempted to have his trial reviewed but was unsuccessful. In January 2023, nearly 9 years after pleading guilty, he filed another appeal seeking to reduce his parole eligibility period. This time, he submitted a petition to the federal district court. But as before, his appeal was denied. Stephen's mother struggled to accept the painful reality of her son's involvement in the murder. His grandfather expressed deep sadness, reflecting on the 25 years during which he had been proud of his grandson but now found it hard to recognize him. During a visit to the facility where Stephen was held, the grandfather felt as if he were seeing a different person. Overwhelmed with despair, he left and chose not to visit Stephen again. Lauren's relatives found some comfort in the belief that Stephen would eventually realize the significance of his actions during his time in prison, which might lead to his repentance. Caitlin, her sister, honored Lauren by naming one of her daughters after her. The family continues to celebrate Lauren's birthday and maintains a tradition of wearing pink clothes on Wednesdays, just as Lauren had during her life. Lauren's tragic fate is a reminder of the importance of staying vigilant when sensing danger. In Lauren's case, the threat was not only visible but also close at hand, as she fell victim to someone who appeared harmless. This incident not only destroyed her dreams but also broke the hearts of her loved ones. Gretchen Harrington was born on June 13, 1967, in Pennsylvania. She was the youngest of 3 daughters. Soon after her birth, the family moved to the small town of Brummel. Her father, who was a pastor, got a job at the local church. Gretchen immediately loved this town. She spent a lot of time outdoors with her sisters and new friends. Brummel was a safe place, so parents weren't afraid to let their children play outside until dark. With its rich nature and close-knit community, this place was more like a paradise for kids. Raised in a religious family, Gretchen spent a lot of time at her father's church. She also excelled in Sunday school, always getting top grades. On the morning of August 15, 1975, when Gretchen was 8 years old, her family eagerly awaited the arrival of her mother and newborn sister from the hospital. Gretchen also wanted to wait for them, but her father encouraged her not to miss Sunday school to keep her perfect grades. Reluctantly, she agreed, took her Bible, and headed to church. Usually, she walked there with her older sisters, but they both stayed home that morning. Gretchen wasn't afraid to walk alone, as the church was less than a mile away, just an 8-minute walk from her house. The Sunday school lessons consisted of 2 parts. The children gathered at Trinity Church, and after about an hour and a half, some of them headed to Gretchen's father church. But at 11:30 a.m., when the kids arrived at the church, Gretchen's father noticed that his daughter was not among them. It seemed strange because the children were brought as a group. He thought Gretchen might have stayed at the other church, so he called there. Answering the call was the wife of the pastor named David, who taught at the Sunday school. She said Gretchen wasn't there and told her husband about what was happening. He was surprised because Gretchen hadn't even attended his classes that morning. Her father immediately started to worry. He asked David to call the police and went searching for his daughter. The father drove along the route between the churches, checked other streets nearby, but Gretchen was nowhere to be found. He also reached out to her friend's parents, hoping she might have decided to spend time with some of them, but they were all either at church or home. Gretchen's best friend, David's daughter, also hadn't seen her all day. The police immediately began searching. As news of Gretchen's disappearance spread through the town, hundreds of volunteers quickly joined in. Practically, all the locals knew Gretchen's father as they regularly attended his church, so they all wanted to help. Together with the volunteers, the police searched the entire town, then started combing through multiple wooded areas and the riverbank. A police helicopter was also sent to assist, scanning the area from above. The search continued into the night, but yielded no results. The next day, even more volunteers joined in. The police created flyers with Gretchen's photo and information about her disappearance, which were posted along roads and handed out to passing drivers. Despite all efforts, not only did the police fail to find Gretchen, but they couldn't even determine what happened to her. After several days of searching, they didn't find any significant leads at all, and Gretchen's fate remained unknown. Her disappearance became a heavy blow to the local community. People were used to letting their children roam the streets freely from a young age, and nothing like this had ever happened before. The kids could spend hours wandering in the woods, swimming in the river without adult supervision, and their parents never worried. But now all of that was in the past. The fact that no one knew what happened to Gretchen only added to their fear. People discussed various theories. Some thought she might have run away from home. Others believed she went swimming in the river and drowned. But the most frightening theory was that someone had abducted her. Parents stopped letting their children out unsupervised. One local woman even cut her daughter's long hair so she would resemble a boy. Once a safe and peaceful town, overnight it became a place where people lived in uncertainty and fear. The police also questioned anyone who might have had any connection to Gretchen's disappearance. During these conversations, they received several intriguing leads. One witness reported seeing a girl resembling Gretchen near the church that morning. A green station wagon approached her, but the witness didn't see what happened next. Another person shared a similar story, but this time, they said a white Cadillac approached the girl. The police followed up on these leads, checked the owners of all vehicles matching the descriptions in the area, but couldn't establish their involvement. For days after Gretchen's disappearance, detectives got a new lead. A resident of Westchester, Brummel, called the police and said that he had found children's shorts matching the description of Gretchen's clothing. Investigators immediately showed them to Gretchen's mother, but she said they didn't belong to her daughter. From then on, there was no progress in the case for several weeks. The police called off the search operation and focused on the investigation. They continued interviewing people, following up on any available leads, but with each passing day, their hope of finding Gretchen alive diminished. This continued for 2 months until October 14th, when a chilling call came in to the police. A man went for a jog in a large national park about a 20-minute drive from Brummel. There, he noticed something strange in the bushes, and he didn't realize what it was, but when he came closer, he suddenly realized it was a human body. He immediately ran to the park rangers to inform them of the discovery, and they called the police. Officers quickly realized the remains were those of a child, but due to the extent of decomposition, identifying the child was extremely challenging. Detectives assumed it might be Gretchen, so they showed her parents photos of the clothing, which had been left carefully folded next to the remains. Gretchen's mother immediately confirmed they belonged to her daughter because she had made those clothes herself. Soon, forensic experts confirmed it was indeed Gretchen by matching the remains with her dental records. They also determined that the cause of death was multiple severe blows to the head, and the case was reclassified as a homicide. Due to the level of decomposition, they couldn't determine any other details, including whether the victim had been sexually assaulted. Moreover, DNA analysis didn't exist in 1975, so investigators were once again left without any clues. News of the murder reignited the attention of the local community, and the police began receiving even more tips. People realized that a dangerous criminal could still be somewhere among them, so everyone wanted to see the perpetrator brought to justice as soon as possible. Investigators received dozens of tips about suspicious men spotted in the park area where Gretchen's body was found, but all these tips led to dead ends. They also checked everyone living within a few-mile radius who had a history of violent crimes, but this yielded no results either. Several months after the discovery of the body, the case completely stalled, and there were no developments since then. Over the following years, the investigation was reopened from time to time. Detectives reviewed all available tips and leads, but each time it ended nowhere. The main problem was that detectives had no evidence at all. Even when the police began using DNA analysis, it didn't help in this particular case because no foreign samples were found on Gretchen's remains or her clothing. As a result, the case remained unsolved for many decades. It was occasionally mentioned in newspapers and featured on TV, but only in recent years did Gretchen's murder once again reignite wide public attention. 2 journalists, Joanna and Mike, decided to write a book about the crime. They worked on it for several years, gathering all available information piece by piece and trying to uncover new facts. Both journalists grew up in Broumont and were roughly the same age as Gretchen at the time of her murder. Joanna, who was only 9 at the time, remembered it pretty well because it not only impacted her life but also the entire town. After Gretchen's disappearance, children could no longer roam the streets or leave home unsupervised. They all feared that the perpetrator might strike again, and this fear haunted them for many years. Even young children couldn't help but feel how their lives had suddenly changed, so they all remembered Gretchen's murder throughout the years. To write the book, Joanna and Mike secured access to the case documents and spoke with many individuals involved in the case. They carefully pieced together the events of those days, detailing the entire story. This book was released in 2022 and immediately attracted significant attention to the case. However, its major impact came months later when a woman contacted the police to discuss Gretchen's case. She met with the leading detective to tell her story. The woman said that she was 10 years old at the time of the murder and lived in Havertone, just a short distance from Gretchen's home. She was friends with Gretchen and her older sisters, as well as numerous other kids in the area. She often slept over at her friends' houses. And one night, something horrifying happened. While she was staying at the house of 2 sisters, she woke up in the middle of the night to someone touching her. When she opened her eyes, she saw their father in front of her, who quickly left the room. She was afraid to tell anyone about it and stayed in this house for another night. The same thing happened again. Her friend's father entered the bedroom and started touching her. The following morning, she finally told one of the sisters what had happened. To her surprise, she answered that it happened quite frequently. The girl also said that her father sometimes came to her sister at night. When she returned home, she told her parents everything. However, instead of going to the police, they simply prohibited her from visiting her friend's house anymore. And all of this happened just a week before Gretchen's disappearance. After telling her story, the woman finally disclosed the name of this man. It was David Zanstra, the same pastor who taught at the Sunday school. But that wasn't the end of her story. She also revealed that a month after Gretchen's disappearance, one of her friends was twice approached by a man who attempted to abduct her. The girl refused to get into his car and later told her friends that it was Zanstra who tried to lure her somewhere. To corroborate her statement, the woman showed detectives her personal diary from that time. On September 15, 1975, she wrote about her friend's plea to keep it a secret, fearing that David Zanstra might harm her. After receiving this information, the police immediately reopened the investigation. Upon reviewing the case materials, detectives uncovered several suspicious facts that indirectly implicated David. As we remember, it was he who reported Gretchen's disappearance to the police. The pastor provided investigators with a detailed description of her clothing: dark blue zip-up shorts with front studs and pockets without zippers or buttons. He also mentioned that she wore a white top with her hair in braids. At the same time, he claimed not to have seen Gretchen that day. This raised a reasonable question. How could he know what clothes she wore that morning? Especially since, after her body was found, David's descriptions were confirmed. She was wearing those exact clothes. The detectives also learned that the Sunday school classes started about 50 minutes late because Zanstra didn't show up at the church at the usual time. It meant that he would have had enough time to abduct Gretchen, murder her, dispose of her body in the park, and return to the church to begin his lessons. According to David's testimony, which he provided right after Gretchen's disappearance, he drove some of the children in his van to her father's church after the Sunday school classes. He insisted he didn't see Gretchen that morning and only noticed her absence when her father brought it to his attention. Another intriguing fact was that David, along with his wife and 3 children, moved to another state just a few months after the disappearance. The pastor also owned several vehicles, one of which was a green station wagon. As we recall, a witness told the police they saw a similar vehicle approaching a girl near the church on the day Gretchen disappeared. Piecing together all this information, the detectives decided to speak with the man. At that time, he was 83 years old and lived in Georgia, so they drove there. On July 17, 2023, they met with him at the police station and began questioning him. When Zanstra realized the detectives suspected him of murder, he began to deny everything, asking them what exactly they got against him. They told him they had the testimony of a woman he had touched during a sleepover at his house, as well as a story about him molesting his own daughters. Upon hearing this, David was stunned, and pretty soon his demeanor changed completely. Understanding that his dirty secrets were exposed, he stopped denying, and 48 years after the murder, he began to speak. According to his account, that morning he drove to Gretchen's father's church in his green American motor station wagon and saw the girl leaving her house. Waiting until there were no witnesses around, he approached her and offered her a ride. Without any hesitation, Gretchen got into his car. She knew David well because their families were friends, and she was also on her way to his Sunday school classes. But instead of taking her to the church, he drove her to a deserted park area, stopped the car, and told her to undress. Gretchen refused and said she wanted to go home, so Zandstra struck her several times on the head, causing her to lose consciousness. The pastor removed her clothes, satisfied himself, and then drove her to another park. Unable to find a pulse on her, he carried her body into the bushes and covered it with branches. After that, David drove back to the church to start his classes. Upon hearing his confession, the police arrested Zandstra for Gretchen's murder and extradited him to Pennsylvania. He was placed in jail awaiting trial, but for the police, this was just the beginning of a much deeper investigation. Considering that Zandstra had assaulted at least several girls, detectives strongly believed that there were likely other victims. The situation was worsened by the fact that the man worked as a pastor in many different cities and states for decades, so he could have committed numerous other crimes. Most of the time, he worked with children, and he was deeply respected in society, which could have allowed him to avoid any suspicions. But now, when the truth finally came out, detectives took his DNA sample and began searching for matches in other unsolved cases. They also looked into unsolved disappearances of girls in the cities where David had been working. Unfortunately, it didn't take long to find the possible connection. Investigators quickly came across the disappearance of 4-year-old Amanda Campbell from California, which occurred in 1991. Like Gretchen, she walked out of her home in a quiet neighborhood and vanished without a trace. At the time, David Zandstra worked as a pastor in that same neighborhood. Right now, there is no evidence against him, but the police say this case has several striking similarities to Gretchen's abduction and the pastor could be the same perpetrator. They are also continuing to investigate his possible involvement in other crimes. Considering that all of this is happening right now, we may learn a lot more in the coming months. As for the trial for the murder of Gretchen, it has not yet begun. It is possible that David's lawyers will want to prolong the process and advise him to retract his confession. In that case, the trial could drag on for years, and there are no guarantees that the man will live to see the verdict. The case of Orolia Gal. Orolia Gal had lived in Forest Hills for over 10 years. She is originally from Hungary and met her future husband, Howard, at a Christmas party in Budapest in 1994. At that time, she was 20 years old and had just graduated from business school, while Howard was about to complete his master's degree. They exchanged love letters for several weeks, then taking a vacation together in Thailand. After returning to New York to continue his studies, he invited Sher to visit him, and they have been together ever since. He founded a consulting firm and was very successful. Meanwhile, she worked in Manhattan for many years, eventually putting her career on hold to have and raise her 2 sons, Jamie and Leo. On August 2, 2012, the family moved into a 5-bedroom home. They lived happily together, and friends described Orolia as outgoing and friendly. People say she is always smiling, loves to joke, and is willing to chat about any topic. She loved to travel, and her Facebook profile showcased photos from family trips to Paris, China, and Tokyo. However, her greatest happiness is her sons, whom she cared for deeply and was very attentive. On the morning of April 16, 2022, Glenn Van Nostrade was walking his dog around 8:00 a.m. At this time, he saw a large cloth bag lying among a pile of trash near the sidewalk, on the grass near the corner of Venue Subway and Jackie Robinson Avenue. While he often encountered litter on that busy road, something about this bag felt off. As he approached, his dog became agitated and tense. Only when he stood near the bag he noticed the reason: blood was seeping out and running down the concrete sidewalk. Initially, Glenn suspected the bag contained an animal carcass. He nudged it with his foot and found it surprisingly heavy. Curious, he bent down to unzip the bag. Then he saw a pair of pale bare legs inside. He tried to make sense of what he was seeing. He thought they were the legs of a mannequin because the skin looked stiff and unnatural. However, when he unzipped the bag further, he realized that the legs were covered by black jeans, a belt, and part of a woman's waist. Glenn found the woman curled up in a fetal position, her head bowed. He called 911 at 8:02 a.m., deeply disturbed by his discovery. He believed the victim might have been a teenage girl based on her physique. Immediately after that, the police arrived. They quickly blocked the area around the crime scene. At this time, Glenn decided to use his dog to search the nearby area. While crossing the subway avenue, he noticed a trail of blood and alerted the police. This bloody trail, which extended for half a mile from the location of the bag, ultimately led the investigators to a $2 million house on Juno Street. A team of police stormed that house. During a quick search, they discovered blood on the first floor and in the basement, as well as a bloody knife on the third floor. In a bedroom, they found Leo Klein lying in bed. He said he lived in the house with his parents, Orolia and Howard. He also said that his brother Jamie was away. After questioning, the police determined that Leo knew nothing about the situation, so they released him into the care of a relative. Meanwhile, the police identified the body found in a bag. It was Orolia, Leo's mother, who was 51 years old. A forensic examination revealed that she had her throat cut and suffered 58 stab wounds to her torso, neck, and arms. There were also injuries on her palms and fingers, indicating a struggle. Forensic expert Miles said that the crime was very brutal, and the fact that the body was carelessly disposed of showed that this was an act driven by emotion. The extreme violence of the attack indicated that the murderer was likely someone known to Orolia rather than a stranger. This led investigators to suspect that the perpetrator could be the husband, a child, or even a lover. The youngest son, Leo, has been eliminated as a suspect. Jamie, the eldest son, and Howard, the husband, were both out of town on the day of Orolia's death, but they were still being questioned. The identity of the mystery man who dumped the bag remains unknown. The investigation has caused anxiety in Forest Hills following Orolia's sad death. Neighbors were deeply moved by the tragedy. Those familiar with Orolia and her family brought flowers and offered their condolences. The shocking death has raised more questions than answers, leaving the motive for the crime a mystery, as police continue to hunt for the suspect. When the police informed the media that Howard and Jamie were important people, the public's attention quickly turned to Jamie. On the morning of Friday, April 15th, Orolia was reportedly looking at potential colleges for Jamie. Howard tweeted that he arrived in Portland at 1:36 a.m. on April 16th. He later posted another status, which has since been deleted, announcing that he would be returning home to New York soon. The change appears to have come after Howard received a heartbreaking text message from Orolia earlier that morning. The message said, "He's back. Don't call the police or he'll kill the Howard family." Shortly thereafter, Howard was contacted by police and informed that the body of his wife, Orolia, had been found. He worried about his family's safety and faced scrutiny from reporters and social analysts. They said that his Twitter post seemed like a way to create an alibi. The message from Orolia's phone seems like a fictional threat from a movie, making one wonder why a killer would waste time sending such a message after committing the crime. Additionally, there were no signs of forced entry into the house. It appears that Orolia knew the killer or that he used a spare key to enter the house. Police are examining phone calls, surveillance camera videos, and receipts from places Orolia visited to reconstruct her journey before her death. On Friday, April 16th, 2022, she planned to go to Manhattan that evening to see an opera at Lincoln Center with friends. However, when checking her phone, the truth was completely different. On the night of her murder, she had been in contact with 3 different men. One of them will accompany her to Lincoln Center. All 3 men are currently under investigation. That night, Orolia returned home alone by train and stopped by a bar at Forest Hills train station. This is where she often comes to have a drink or a snack after going out. she spoke with the manager, whom she knew well. Police believe Orolia entered her home at 2:40 a.m., around the same time her attacker gained entry. At 4:30 a.m., he carried her body out using her son's hockey bag. A note found on the refrigerator read, "Find a new handyman." On the night of the murder, Orolia had spoken with 3 men, one of whom was David Benola, a 40-years-old handyman who had been working in their home for the past 2 years. He specialized in heating and ventilation. He is married with 2 children. However, 21 years ago, he illegally immigrated to the United States from Mexico. By the time of Orolia's death, he had become estranged from his family and was living in an apartment in nearby Richmond Hill. Neighbors described he as a night owl who often played guitar or rode his bike after dark, frequently stopping at a local cafe for food. The police discovered that David had a close relationship with Orolia, as they often communicated over the phone. He frequently left comments and heart emojis on her Facebook photos, often calling her the most beautiful woman. According to the owner of a store across the street from his apartment, he would come in every evening to buy a red rose and even showed the owner a photo of Orolia, expressing his love for her. The police were aware that she had been in contact with he in early April 2022, just weeks before her murder. The authorities then decided to secretly follow him to look for new clues. 21-years-old Olivia Kalinsky had been a barista at a cafe for 3 years, where David was a frequent visitor. Olivia described him as strange and somewhat creepy, noting that he often stalked people. He frequented the cafe multiple times a week, watching the waitresses and baristas closely, making comments about their looks. He also left affectionate notes in the tip jar. He even proposed to 2 of the employees. The cafe staff called the police several times, but he always managed to leave before they arrived. David's passion for YouTube clearly shows his thoughts and desires, mainly revolving around 2 themes: seduction and violence. He has created a YouTube playlist with many videos related to local crime. The playlist also includes many videos about intimacy and women, offering tips on attraction and seduction. One playlist has over 200 videos, all aimed at helping viewers develop their ability to attract women. It is worth noting that he is a man with a rich imagination and a penchant for violence. Then, surveillance cameras captured images of David walking near his apartment with a homemade white bandage on his left arm. That day, he visited a city doctor for treatment of cuts on his hands. However, he was referred to the hospital because the cuts were too deep. The police postponed cleaning up the trash at the crime scene for several days to conduct a special search because they believe this pile of trash may contain evidence that helped convict him. Among the discarded objects in the trash pile, they found blood-soaked brown boots, believed to belong to David, which were worn when he stabbed Orolia nearly 60 times, along with a bloody t-shirt and bloody bandages. On Wednesday, April 19, 2024, detectives returned to the area to locate David, who had noticed he was being followed. David approached a patrol car and said he heard they were looking for him. The police then took him to the station, and there he admitted his involvement in Orolia's murder. After a brief pause to eat a croissant, he repeated his confession for the video recording. During the prosecution, David explained that he and Orolia had an on-again, off-again relationship for 2 years. Recently, she had ended their relationship again. On the morning of April 16th, he went to her house to try to reconcile. However, their argument became so violent and loud that they had to go down to the basement to avoid waking her son, Leo. The argument became more heated, making David very angry. In a fit of anger, he grabbed a knife and cut her throat, stabbing her multiple times. To prevent Leo from discovering the body, he placed it in the boy's hockey bag and discarded it in a nearby forest park. David admitted that he sent a threatening message to her husband Howard in which he stated he would kill the rest of the family. However, his testimony contained several inconsistencies, particularly regarding his possession of a knife from Orolia's kitchen during the fight in the basement. The next day, he changed his confession. He explained that he had gone to her house after learning that she had given him HIV and a sexually transmitted disease she had contracted from other men. He claimed that he knew she had received a call from another man and was planning to meet that man, which he could not accept. He also reported that during the altercation, She took a knife and forced him to leave the house, threatening to kill him. At that moment, he seized the knife from her and harmed her. On April 20th, David Benola was arrested and charged with degree murder, degree criminal trespass, and degree criminal possession of a weapon. Despite confessing to the crime twice, he pleaded not guilty. If found guilty, he could face a sentence ranging from 25 years to life in prison. District Attorney Melinda Catt announced that a serious crime had occurred, leaving 2 teenagers, Leo and Jamie, without their mother. This incident has also created fear in the community. David Benola was sentenced to 25 years in prison in November 2022 after pleading guilty to manslaughter in the killing of Orolia Gal in Queens, New York. After his prison term, he will be required to serve 5 years of probation. Many believe Orolia shares some responsibility for her tragic death, stemming from her infidelity. At the memorial service, Jamie, the eldest son of she, spoke for himself and his younger brother, Leo. He expressed that when he thinks of his mother, he remembers the hard work and dedication she put into them. He said she wanted her children to be happy, and her happiness was their happiness. He stressed that they would always remember this. Alexandra Kemp was born on October 11, 1982 in the city of Leawood, Kansas. With a population of just over 30,000 people, it was one of the wealthiest suburbs in the Kansas City metropolitan area. Alexandra, who preferred to go by Ali, lived there with her parents and 2 brothers. From a very young age, she was incredibly active, participating in 19 different sports teams and various other activities throughout her school years. She had a passion for soccer and also excelled academically. After graduating from high school in February 2001, Ali enrolled at Kansas State University to study ecology. She always wanted a career that would allow her to help others. Ali even planned to travel to Russia on an exchange program to help orphan children. In February 2002, when she had finished her freshman year at college, 19-year-old Ali returned home for the summer break. She wanted to find a part-time job and also spend some time with her loved ones before returning back. She was also thrilled to reunite with her longtime boyfriend, Phil. The couple had been together for 5 years, but they had chosen different universities after high school. Despite the distance, they continued their relationship, and summer breaks were their only opportunity to be together. Ali and Phil landed a job together at the local public pool, and Ali's younger brother also joined in. Their shifts lined up one after the other. Phil worked mornings, Ali during the day, and her brother in the evenings. On Thursday, June 18th, Ali showed up for her shift to relieve Phil, and she thought about asking him to stay with her a bit, but then changed her mind since they had plans to meet up for a date later in the evening. The day was pretty overcast, so there weren't many visitors at the pool. Ali sat at her desk, reading a book, waiting for the workday to end. As evening approached, her younger brother arrived at the pool to start his shift. However, to his surprise, he couldn't find his sister anywhere. Her phone, keys, and other personal items were left unattended on the table, yet Ali herself was nowhere to be seen. After searching the area, he decided to call their parents. Their father, Roger Kemp, rushed over immediately, growing increasingly worried as the situation seemed odd. He knew that Ali wouldn't just leave her belongings, including her phone, and leave work early. Roger meticulously searched the entire area, checking every corner. Finally, he reached the pump room. It was very dark inside, and he didn't notice anything suspicious. But as he was about to leave, something caught his eye. There was a blue tarp spread out in the corner, and a foot was sticking out from underneath. His heart sank as he got closer, realizing it was his daughter lying beneath it. Ali was covered in blood and bruises, showing no signs of life. She was also missing her shorts and underwear. Roger immediately called an ambulance, but the doctors couldn't save her. She passed away shortly after arriving at the hospital. Medical experts determined that Ali had suffered a severe head injury, and the cause of death was strangulation. They also found numerous defense wounds, indicating that Ali had tried to fend off her attacker. Police launched an investigation and quickly found the piece of evidence. There was an open first aid kit with a pill container on the floor of the pump room, near where the victim was discovered. It was sent to the lab and experts found, but he was not in the FBI database. Police began looking for possible suspects, starting with Ali's boyfriend. Given the brutality of the attack, investigators considered that the assailant might have had personal motives. According to Phil, after his shift, he went to visit friends, and his alibi was corroborated by several people. He also provided his DNA sample, which didn't match the perpetrator's. The same was true for Ali's father and brother. They both provided their samples right away. Roger was overwhelmed with grief and spent the entire night at the morgue, unable to leave Ali alone. The next day, as some city residents gathered to express their condolences, he gave a speech and promised to find his daughter's killer at any cost. News of the murder quickly spread among the locals, who had rarely encountered such crimes before. As a result, the police received numerous tips, and almost instantly, they found their lead. Several pool visitors reported seeing a strange man lurking around the pool area the day before the murder, peering at them from behind bushes and even filming them. Other witnesses mentioned seeing a similar-looking man driving a beige Ford pickup truck in the pool parking lot. None of them recognized the man, and it seemed unlikely he was a visitor. Phil added another intriguing detail. One day, Ellie had told him that she sometimes felt uneasy working alone, as if someone was watching her. She didn't specify if she had seen anyone suspicious near the pool, but the accounts of other witnesses suggested it could have been the same man. Another lead came from Ali's friend, Laurel. On the day of the murder, around 3 p.m., Ali called her, saying she was bored. Laurel decided to drive to the pool to keep her company. Upon arrival, she honked several times, expecting Ali to come out and meet her. But instead, a man came out from the pump room and waved at Laurel. Thinking it was Ali's boss, she thought that her visit might cause trouble for her friend and decided to leave. Upon hearing this account, detectives believed that this man was likely the killer. Based on Laurel's testimony, they created a composite sketch of the suspect, which was then distributed to local newspapers and TV channels. Phil initiated a flyer distribution campaign featuring the composite sketch and a description of the suspect. With the help of his friends and numerous volunteers, thousands of flyers were spread throughout this town. Despite all these efforts, the police still couldn't close in on the perpetrator. Roger also raised $50,000 as a reward for any information leading to the murderer, but it yielded no results. Sometime later, he suddenly had an idea to put up a billboard featuring the suspect's composite sketch along the busy highway he regularly uses on his way to work. He discussed this idea with the police, who supported it. However, they mentioned that their department had no money to rent a billboard and he would have to cover all the expenses himself. Roger contacted a company that was renting billboards and asked about the cost. When they learned about his daughter's murder, they decided to provide the billboard completely free of charge, wanting to help crack the case. Ali's father, who hadn't expected such a turn of events, gratefully accepted their offer. Together with the police, they created a banner featuring the composite sketch, the suspect's car drawing, and information about the $50,000 reward. After the billboard went up, the police began receiving significantly more tips, with the number surpassing 1,000 in just a few weeks. They carefully checked each one and soon stumbled upon some intriguing lead. They were told the composite sketch resembled a local resident named James Strader. Detectives went to talk to him, but Strader claimed he was at work during the time of the however. Soon the police received another tip about Strader and found out he owned the same type of car as the suspect. But there was more to come. The police learned that he was wanted in 2 states, suspected of a series of crimes. In just 3 weeks, he allegedly committed 3 sexual assaults and 2 kidnappings. He assaulted his ex-girlfriend, then forced her to drive with him in search of a new victim. Soon, he stopped and attempted to break into someone's home to steal money. At that moment, a 14-year-old girl was passing by, and Strader forced her into his car with threats. He then drove to a remote area, assaulted the girl and his ex-girlfriend, left them both there and drove away. Sometime later, he knocked on another woman's door and said that his car had broken down. When she opened the door, Strader pulled out a knife, entered the house, and assaulted her. He then abducted the woman and drove her to another town, but she managed to escape. Eventually, he was apprehended in Utah, pulled into a gas station and drove away without paying, prompting the staff to call the police. Soon after, a police officer noticed his car and pulled him over, ran his ID and saw that the man was wanted for kidnappings and assaults. While speaking with the officer, Strader smirked at him and said he should handcuff him. Investigators in Ali's case immediately reached out to their colleagues in another state, asking for a DNA sample from Strader. However, as soon as the lab finished the analysis, the detectives faced an unexpected turn. His DNA didn't match the sample found on Ali's clothing or the pill bottle. Eventually, Strader received a life sentence for his other crimes, and detectives continued their search for Ali's killer. For many months, they made no progress. But in February, the detectives received another interesting tip. A person called the police saying the composite sketch resembled his acquaintance, a man named Teddy Hoover. Upon investigating this man, police learned that he lived in Kansas City and worked for a pool maintenance company. They also found his name in the case files. Hoover was one of the people gathered at the pool when the body was discovered. He had been questioned along with others but hadn't raised any suspicions. Investigators went to his house and asked some questions about Ali's murder. Hoover claimed he hardly remembered where he was on that particular day as it had been 2 years. The officers asked for his DNA sample, but Teddy refused, saying he needed to discuss it with his lawyer. Police didn't rush to rule him out as a suspect, but they lacked any evidence to tie him to this crime. Later, they decided to speak with him again, but there was a problem. Teddy, along with his girlfriend, had simply disappeared, and their current whereabouts remained unknown. A month later, another tip came into the police. Someone, who decided to remain anonymous, informed them that Teddy and his girlfriend were now living in Connecticut, over 1,000 miles away from Kansas City. This seemed highly suspicious. Teddy had moved across the country right after the police took an interest in him. The detectives reached out to the state's postal service to track Teddy's new address through them, but they couldn't find any information about him. So, detectives requested the same for his girlfriend's name, and this time they hit the mark. The woman was receiving mail at an address in the small town of Bantam. However, there was something peculiar. A man named Benjamin Appleby was also receiving mail at the same address. Investigators checked this name and discovered that this man had an extensive criminal record, including robberies and assaults. Interestingly, Teddy Hoover also had convictions for similar offenses, including an active arrest warrant for public indecency. Detectives began to suspect that something wasn't right. According to the postman, who regularly delivered letters to Teddy's girlfriend's address, he only saw 2 people in the house, and based on his descriptions, Appleby closely resembled Hoover. The police once again asked their colleagues in Connecticut for help. They went to the house and confirmed that Teddy Hoover indeed lived there, leading to his arrest on the warrant for public indecency. Meanwhile, detectives in Ali's case arrived in Connecticut and started preparing for the interrogation. They set up an investigation board with photos of the victim, Teddy, and pictures from the crime scene, hoping it would help to obtain a confession from Teddy. As he was brought into this room, he immediately became nervous seeing all this. Almost right away, he admitted that Benjamin Appleby was his real name, and Teddy Hoover was the identity of his late friend, which he used to avoid arrest. He denied any involvement in Ali's murder, but that didn't last long. Just 10 minutes into the questioning, he started talking. According to Benjamin, on that day, he went to the pool to speak with the manager and offer his company's cleaning services. That's when he saw Ali, and he instantly liked her. She was in the pump room, and Benjamin approached her, trying to start a conversation. Ali responded politely to his compliments but clearly wasn't interested. Benjamin continued to compliment her, but she wasn't into it and tried to leave. He blocked the door with his hand and tried to touch her. When Ali pushed him away, he started beating her. He hit her multiple times, took off her clothes, intending to assault her, but then he heard a honking outside. So he strangled her, covered her with a tarp, and went outside, where he saw her friend, Laurel, sitting in her car. He waved at her and she drove away. After that, he left the crime scene too. Sometime later, Benjamin decided to come back and arrived just as medics were taking Ali out of the pump room. That's when the police questioned him, but he didn't raise any suspicions. Benjamin said he didn't know why he committed this crime and regretted it. He also added that he really liked Ali, and when she pushed him away, he just lost control over himself. After obtaining his confession, investigators sent his DNA sample to the lab. It matched the samples found on Ali's clothes and the pill container. When asked why he took those pills, Benjamin said he was trying to find something in the first aid kit to use as a lubricant. The day after his arrest, the man hired a lawyer who tried to withdraw his confession, even though just a few hours earlier, Benjamin had said he didn't want to put the victim's family through a trial. However, with his DNA found on the victim's clothes, there was hardly any chance of avoiding punishment. At the trial, his lawyer argued that the murder was accidental, but he couldn't prove such a far-fetched version of events. In 2005, Benjamin was found guilty and sentenced to a minimum of 50 years in prison. This means he wouldn't be eligible for release until February 1954, and even then it wasn't guaranteed. Considering he was only 29 at the time of sentencing, he would likely remain behind bars for the rest of his life. Since then, Benjamin has repeatedly tried to appeal his sentence, but all his attempts have failed. However, each attempt has been a heavy burden for Ali's family. Her father has done everything he could to ensure his daughter's killer won't be released. Ali's parents also organized self-defense classes for women in her memory. The project gained widespread attention, and tens of thousands of women have been trained through it. Ali's father was even invited to the White House to meet with Barack Obama. The president awarded him for organizing the self-defense classes and highlighted their importance. Roger was also thanked for coming up with the idea of posting information about wanted criminals on billboards. It turned out that no one had done this before, and this method proved to be very effective. The case of Orolia Gal. Orolia Gal was born in 1989 in Patras, Greece. She had a younger sister named Dimitra, who was 8 years her junior. The sisters primarily grew up with their grandparents. Orolia was known for her spirited personality and was often described as a mischievous girl. She pursued a medical education to become a nurse, but never worked in that field. Throughout her life, she tried various professions, but her true passion was football. While working as a football referee, Orolia met her future husband, Manos Daskalakis, who was a goalkeeper at the time. Orolia, 22 years old, was deeply in love with 19-year-old Manos. They began dating, and soon after, Orolia became pregnant, and they to decide to marry. Manos' parents opposed their relationship, feeling embarrassed by Rula's unusual behavior and the fact that she was 3 years older than him. However, this did not stop Manos. They got married in 2012, and soon after, their daughter Georgina was born. Like her mother, Georgina also developed a love for football, and Orolia took her to training sessions. In February 2015, Melina, Manos and Rula's daughter, was born. Although on the surface they looked like a happy family with 2 children, in reality, many problems still existed within. They frequently argued, and Orolia struggled with depression, having attempted to end her life twice without success. A tragedy struck on April 13, 2019, when their 3.5-year-old daughter Melina died. She had been hospitalized with symptoms of a rare form of leukemia, which doctors assured them was fully treatable. Melina has overcome the disease. She was set to return home. Everything seemed fine. On that fateful day, Orolia was at the hospital with Melina. The little girl was in a cheerful mood, enjoying shashlik that her parents had brought. However, everything changed abruptly after her father, Manos, stepped out of the room. According to Orolia, they settled down for a nap shortly after he left. About an hour later, a nurse came in to administer medication, and just 10 minutes after that, at 4:40 p.m., Melina began trembling, wheezing, and have a seizure. Orolia cried out for her daughter, but when that didn't help, she ran to summon the nurses. They rushed to assist Melina, but it was too late. A forensic expert later determined that the cause of death was liver failure and pulmonary edema. The family was deeply affected by their grief. Manos and Orolia are back together, and their marriage grew stronger. In 2021, They welcomed their child, Irita, and they felt happy again, believing that nothing could disrupt their joy. Tragically, just 6 months later, the baby passed away. She passed away in her sleep at their home in March 2021, while sharing a room with her mother, Rola. According to the forensic examination, she died of sinus node aplasia and heart cell degeneration, leading to cardiac arrest. This disease usually occurs in the elderly and is rarely seen in children. However, doctors believe that this is a congenital disease. On that tragic night, Rola's sister Demitra was not staying over, leaving Rola alone with the baby. Around 7:30 a.m., Irita woke up and Rola gave her a pacifier before they both tried to go back to sleep. When they checked on Irita at 11 a.m., she was unresponsive. In a panic, Rola called Manos for help and attempted to perform CPR. After several unsuccessful tries, she decided to call an ambulance. An hour later, the paramedics arrived and confirmed Irita's death. Her body had already begun to cool and stiffen. The loss of her child, Irita, raised many questions about Rola's actions. Why did she not call an ambulance right away, instead of trying to resuscitate her child in contacting Manos? Valuable time was lost, and there were concerns that Irita might have been saved. Rola explained that she was in shock, and an hour later, she realized she needed to call an ambulance. The family was left with one child, their eldest daughter Georgina. Before Irita's death, the relationship between Manos and Rola was already strained, and the loss only increased the emotional distance between them. Their problems are getting more and more stressful, and divorce seemed imminent. Georgina also suffered from many health problems. Just 15 days after Irita's passing, she was hospitalized due to convulsions. The medical team tried their best to resuscitate her, and thanks to their efforts, she survived. However, she was diagnosed with heart failure, which led to the implantation of a defibrillator and a pacemaker. Following this, she was closely monitored by doctors and had to be rehospitalized multiple times for encephalopathy, the cause of which remained unknown. She experienced seizures, and despite thorough examinations, the reasons for them could not be identified. The doctors decided to transfer her to a different clinic for further evaluation. Tragically, on January 29, 2022, 9-year-old Georgina passed away. This news shocked everyone, especially since she had seemed healthy. As doctors were trying to save the girl, her mother, Rola, suddenly declared her dead. She asked them to stop, saying that it was pointless and that she would not come back to life. She also said that Georgina had endured a lot of pain and suggested that it would be better for them to let her rest in peace. Rola's calm demeanor during this moment surprised the medical staff. A few hours after Georgina's passing, Rola shared a post on social media expressing her feelings. She stated that she had given life to Georgina but was upset that Georgina had left her. Rola highlighted that Georgina brought her joy and was a source of strength in her life. In her farewell message to her daughter, she wished Georgina to enjoy her reunion with her sisters. Rola also expressed that, in her heart, Georgina would always be with her, and she affirmed her love for all 3 of her children. In memory of her children, Rola got tattoos. She got her tattoo after Georgina was born, and the others were done after the deaths of her 2 daughters, Melina and Nerida. The circumstances surrounding the deaths of her 3 daughters raised suspicions. They all died within 3 years, one after the other. In each case, their health conditions appeared to be stable, and doctors were initially optimistic about their recovery. However, doctors were shocked by the sad outcome. This caused many doubts and speculations. Some people believe the Pasparago family was cursed and that these deaths were the result of supernatural forces. Doctors were skeptical of Rola's explanation for her daughter's death and contacted law enforcement to investigate. The focus was on the eldest daughter, Georgina, as they had her medical records and her body for further examination. Investigators interviewed 20 doctors from 5 hospitals in Athens and Patras who had treated Georgina. A discrepancy arose between what the doctors reported and what Rola claimed. Initially, doctors suspected Georgina had heart problems, but later tests revealed little girl did not have any heart issues. Rola frequently reported seizures and neurological issues, but examinations did not show any evidence of these conditions. Instead, Georgina was diagnosed with gastroenteritis and psychological issues stemming from the deaths of her two younger sisters, and little girl was discharged. However, little girl was readmitted due to seizures, and her condition remained unclear. Plans were made to transfer her to a hospital with better monitoring capabilities, but unfortunately, she died before that could happen, despite appearing healthy at the time. Before her death, Georgina told doctors she felt as if there was a bomb in her stomach about to explode. She was concerned and tried to understand the deaths of her younger sisters, Melina and Irita, fearing something similar might happen to her. She shared her concerns with the doctors at the hospital. Manos and Rula initially denied any involvement in the children's deaths. They did some interviews and finally cleared the doubts about them. They spoke of the traumatic experience they faced, often using the words suddenly to stress that their children died unexpectedly and without warning, even though there were no signs that anything bad was imminent. According to Rula, Georgina had difficulty breathing. However, toxicology tests revealed no issues. The doctor confirmed that Georgina had no heart problems and mentioned her sudden death. However, the investigation is still ongoing. It was discovered that Rula was present with her 3 children at all 3 incidents, but she asserted that this said nothing. Rula declares that she is the children's mother and that she has always been there for them. She didn't understand why that surprised everyone and told them to stop talking nonsense. Manos blamed the doctors and was confused because all tests showed the children's was healthy before his sudden death. He believed the treatment may have been wrong, although toxicological tests performed after the girls' deaths yielded no findings. They were only conducted for the most common substances, so it was decided to do more extensive testing that would not normally be done. In the case involving Irita's death, Rola called an ambulance too late. Similarly, in the case with Melina, Rola delayed seeking help and only contacted the nurses 35 minutes after Melina had died, by which point her body had started to cool. Why did it take Rola so long to ask for help? A forensic expert observed small scratches on Melina's nose, indicating that there might have been a struggle. In addition, tests showed that the concentration of ketamine in Georgina's body was very high, 6 times the normal amount used for anesthesia. Ketamine is not available at regular pharmacies and is hard to obtain, indicating that it could not have entered her system by accident. The drug was injected into Georgina's body just 20 minutes before her death. The question arises, who could have administered the ketamine if the doctors did not? The medical staff had last checked on her shortly before she died. And since Rula was the only person present in the hospital room when little girl passed away, Rula became a suspect in the murder. Later, the bodies of the 2 other girls, Melina and Nerida, were exhumed. While no ketamine was found, but experts concluded that both Melina and Nerida died of suffocation and their deaths were classified as murder. A bloody handkerchief was discovered next to the baby's body. This handkerchief had been taken from the house. Rula had requested its return but was denied. On March 30th, 2022, police arrested 33 years old Rula Pisparagu at her younger sister's house in Patras. Rula had a medical degree and was capable of obtaining the drug. She knows her actions well and does them consciously. Investigators established that several years ago, she attended seminars related to criminology. Rola's younger sister, Dimitra, refused to believe that Rola could be responsible for the children's deaths. She stated that she did not believe Rola would have harmed her daughters and that if they did not die of natural causes, then someone else was to blame and should be punished. Dimitra confirmed that she did not see anything unusual while in the house during the time of Irita's death. However, others described Rola as cold and emotionless, suggesting she could potentially be responsible for the tragedy. During the investigation of Georgina's notebook, a piece of paper was discovered that said, "Her mother, Rola, is very evil." Neighbors reported witnessing Rula physically abuse Georgina when little girl was just a baby. They informed the police, and the complaint was forwarded to social services, which monitored the family by making regular visits to their home. A message was found on Rola's phone that she sent the day before Georgina's death, stating, "See what happens tomorrow." This message became a crucial piece of evidence against her. After Rola's arrest, her husband, Manos, learned about the evidence and became convinced of her guilt, leading him to file for divorce. He was shocked by her actions and don't understand what her motive is. Manos mentioned that she was pregnant at the time of Georgina's death, but he suspected the child was not his since they had not been intimate for a long time. Following Georgina's death, Rolla quickly ended her pregnancy. Manos believed she might have been seeing another man to provoke jealousy, and he also questioned whether their middle daughter, Melina, and youngest daughter, Irita, were his biological children. When Rolla learned about the divorce, she became very angry. She sent a message to her friend, expressing her desire to cast a spell on her husband, Manos, to prevent him from leaving her. 2 weeks before Georgina's death, Manos proposed a divorce, prompting she to consult fortune tellers in hopes of keeping he. Unfortunately, this did not help. So what could Rolla's motives be? Initially, there was speculation that she might have Munchausen syndrome. This is a condition in which caregivers intentionally harm or create health problems for the person they care for in order to gain attention or sympathy. However, this theory was later dismissed. It was then revealed that Manos had a mistress. Rolla was aware of the infidelity and was contemplating divorce herself. She desperately attempted to hold on to her husband, possibly seeking to regain his attention and rebuild the family. Rolla's younger sister, Dimitra, does not accept this hypothesis. She asserts that she advised Rolla to divorce Manos due to issues in their marriage. Although Rolla understood the problems, she hesitated to divorce for the sake of their children. Dimitra found it hard to believe that Rolla could be capable of such actions. A psychiatrist who evaluated Rolla concluded that her thoughts were entirely centered on her husband. She was obsessed with him, exhibiting intense jealousy towards other women. After Rolla was arrested, about 500 people gathered outside her home, expressing outrage in demanding the death penalty for killing her 3 children. At that time, her mother, younger sister, and other relatives were inside the home. The trial in this case is still in progress. Rolla is currently in custody, housed in a solitary VIP cell that includes various amenities. She does not interact with other inmates, and for her safety, she is under constant surveillance due to concerns that she may attempt to end her life. Rolla is charged with the murder of 3 children, but she continues to deny all allegations. She insists that she is a victim who has lost children and freedom. She believes this is a misunderstanding and is confident that she will be acquitted, released from prison, and able to repair her relationship with Manos. She has not yet accepted the reality of her divorce. Rolla's ex-husband, Manos, wants nothing to do with her. He is in a new relationship, planning a wedding and hoping to have children. On March 29, 2024, Rolla Pisparagu was sentenced to life in prison by a jury in Athens. The jury unanimously found her guilty of the murder of her eldest daughter, Georgina. The court agreed with the prosecutor's recommendation for the sentence. Jane Pritchard was a very bright student who had a love for growing plants and shrubs. She studied hard and made school one of her top priorities, and when she graduated Poolesville High School in 1976, she was her class's valedictorian. After high school, she would attend Western Maryland College, where she studied political science and biology, and in 1980 would graduate with honors. After college, she became a botanist, but still had her sights set high and wanted to pursue law school with a study in environmental law. With this in mind, in 1986, she would return to college to pursue a master's degree in botany. Jane lived about 2 hours away from Blackbird Forest State Park in Delaware and had studied the wild hog peanut the summer before for her master's degree. On September 20th, 1986, she would leave her home in Clarksburg, Maryland, and make the 2-hour trip back to the park. She was driving her 1980 Chevy Blazer and arrived to the park before 8 a.m. and started working on her research. Visitors in the park would say that they saw her working off the side of a dirt road in the forest, surrounded by electronic equipment and engrossed in her research. Around 5:30 p.m. that day, 2 campers would find Jane's partially clothed body lying 20 feet from her equipment with a gunshot wound to her back. Investigators said that Jane had been doing a minute-by-minute recording of data when it ended abruptly before 10 a.m. Forest officials would say there was between 25 and 50 hunters in the 7,000-acre forest that day because it was the first weekend of Delaware squirrel hunting season. While investigators refused to provide any details on the shooting, they were certain it was no accident. 2 days after her death, a squirrel hunter would come forward and claim he saw Jane talking to another hunter around 10 a.m. that day. However, the more investigators questioned the hunter, the more they started becoming suspicious and would eventually accuse him of killing Jane due to all the inconsistencies in his story. He would be charged and a trial date was set. However, in August 1987, before he was set to go to trial, all charges were dropped. That's because a DNA test done on hair found at the crime scene proved he was innocent. This made investigators realize they should take the hunter's claim more seriously and start looking for an unknown white male around 5'9" with a medium build, seen wearing a brown jacket and blue jeans. Despite interviewing nearly 300 people, detectives were unable to arrest a suspect, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Jantel Johnson was born on September 8, 1994. She lived with her family in Newark, Delaware when she disappeared on February 3, 2010 at the age of 15. Her mother dropped her and her brother off at school that morning, but a few hours later, Jantel, who was 5 months pregnant, called her mother and stated that she didn't feel well and that she was going home early. She apparently arrived home at Autumn Park Apartments on Winter Haven Drive, but later when her brother came to pick her up for church, she was nowhere to be found. The door to the apartment was unlocked and there was no indication of forced entry or a struggle. Jantel's personal belongings, including her purse, eyeglasses, and winter clothes, were left behind. At 10 p.m., when she was still not home and her family could not reach her by phone, her mother would report her missing. Her family believes she left the apartment voluntarily and didn't plan on being gone long, but something happened to her while she was out. Many people speculate that since the last call on her phone was made from her boyfriend, that he may have called her to come outside, and since it was cold, she got into his car to talk and then met with foul play. The alleged father of her unborn child was a 26-year-old man who has a history of domestic violence against another woman that he has a child with. He has been interviewed by police but was uncooperative. However, he has not yet been named as a suspect in her case. Records also do not indicate that his vehicle was ever searched. Her family stated they had accepted Jantel's pregnancy and were supportive of her decision to keep the baby, and they do not believe she ran away from home. She had run away from home one time before but had returned home very quickly. Because of this one incident, police initially thought she was a missing runaway. This case has sadly received very little attention, with no news conferences or much publicity at all. Authorities do believe she may still be in the local area, or that she may be in Wilmington, Delaware, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Maryland, or New York. They've also speculated that she may be in the company of the man she was allegedly pregnant by, and he reportedly has ties to these other states. However, many people fear that her boyfriend caused her harm due to the risk of serving jail time because of the Delaware laws concerning statutory rape. Her hair was in braids when she disappeared and her ears are pierced. She needs glasses or contact lenses, but wasn't wearing any at the time of her disappearance. She was last known to be wearing a black ski jacket with a fur-trimmed hood. Her family continues to search for answers and hopes for some kind of justice, but as of today, this case remains unsolved. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.